Okay, so today we're going to go over Unit 3, Day 4, which is function notation. At the top, I gave you a small description of what a function is. You already know what this is. Basically, a function is an input and an output. All the x's have to be different, and if it's on a graph, you're looking at a graph, for it to be a function, it has to pass the vertical line test, okay? So now, today we're going to talk about how to evaluate certain function notations for a specific input. Now, number one says if you're given that function, evaluate f of 2. So if you know that that represents f of x, and if you have f of 2, that means the x is 2. So in other words, they're saying, aka, x equals 2. That's what they're saying with this. When you see this right here, that means x equals 2. So with that being said, they're telling you to plug in 2 for every one of them. Now, if this f of x confuses you, you can just change that to y. Okay, because remember, f of x is y. So now, all you have to do is take your x and plug it in. So negative 4 times 2 plus 7. So now, negative 2 times, or negative 4 times 2 is negative 8 plus 7 is negative 1. So y equals negative 1. Or you can say f of x equals negative 1, or you can say f of 2 equals negative 1, okay? So all these are valid answers. Okay. Number 2, given that function, evaluate g of negative 1. Well, you know this means x equals 2, because you see the negative 1 is in the place where the x is supposed to be. So that means I'm going to plug them in. Now this time, I'm not going to change g of x into y. I'm just going to leave it like that. And I'm going to say g of 2 equals 2 and 2 go into the places where the x's are at. So that means we have 2 squared, which is 4. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. So g of 2 equals 4 minus 8 is negative 4. So there's your answer. Or you can say g of x equals negative 4. Or you can say y equals negative 4. Okay? So all of these are valid answers. Okay? Now, let's move on. Number 3. Given f of x equals 6x plus 7 and g of x equals 3 plus x squared, evaluate the following. So they're saying that f of negative 3, we got to solve that. So you know this right here represents your x. So that means every time I have an x in that equation, I'm going to plug it in. So in other words, you're basically doing y equals 6x plus 7. So instead of the x, I'm going to put parentheses. And inside those parentheses, negative 3 goes in there, okay? Because that's what they're telling me. So that means 6 times negative 3 plus 7 gives me negative 11. Or you can just say f of x equals negative 11. Or you can say f of negative 3 equals negative 11. Okay? So those 3 are valid answers. Now, moving on. G of negative 3. Same idea, but this time I'm going to have to plug it into the function that says g of x. The first one we used the function f of x. For this one, we're going to use the function g of x. So for that one, I'm just going to say 3 plus parentheses square. And inside those parentheses, the number negative 3 goes in there. Because remember, this is your x, and we're using the g of x function. So negative 3 squared is 9. 9 plus 3 is 12. And there's your answer for that one. Okay? And of course, you can write it a little bit fancier than that by doing y equals negative, or y equals 12, f of x equals 12, or g of x equals 12, g of negative 3 equals 12. But really, the answer is 12. We evaluated this function notation, and it came out to be 12. Now, for this one, you have a couple things that you need to do. First, you need to figure out what f of 3 is. So let's take a moment to plug 3 into the f of x function. Okay, so that will be 6 times x plus 7. So instead of the 3, or instead of the x, I'm going to put a 3 down. So 6 times 3 plus 7 gives me 25. Now for this one, instead of the x's on the g of x function, I'm going to plug in a 2. So we have 3 plus parentheses square, and inside those parentheses will be the number 2. So 3 plus 4 gives me 7. So now they're telling me to add these two results. So 25 plus 7 gives me 32. So my answer for that is 32. Okay, so right now we've been solving for the value x, or we're solving for y. So basically we're plugging in x to get a value. Now, if you flip to the back, we have a couple more problems to do. Now, we have E, F, and G. Now let's look at E. Now, if you notice, before we would get something like f of 3, something like that, okay? Now, if you notice, these problems are different. Now, remember, f of x means y. So if you wanted to, this means y equals 19 if you wanted to switch f of x to y. So they're saying if y equals 19, then let's evaluate. Let's solve for this. Well, let's go back to the equation that we were using, okay? The equations we were using was f of x equals 6x plus 7, okay? So let's go ahead and write that down because that's what we're using. It says f of x. So f of x equals 6x plus 7. Now, they're telling me that y, or f of x, is 19. Here, you notice I still have f of x. So if you wanted to, you could just change that to y equals 6x plus 7 if you really wanted to, if you don't like the f of x, okay? But anyways, they're saying that if y equals 19, then what does x equal? So I need to plug in 19 in here, okay, and bring down your 6x plus 7. And of course, you're going to need to solve for x, so you're going to have to jailbreak. So 19 minus 7 gives me 12 equals 6x, and then you want to divide by 6, so x equals 2. Okay? So you're saying that when y equals 19, x equals 2. That's what we just solved, okay? Versus on the other side, we were given the x. So here we were saying that x, they're saying if x equals negative 3, then what does y equal? Negative 11, okay? And just remember, f of x is just a fancier way of writing that information down, okay? Just don't get confused. Now let's try f, okay? Same idea. This is y equals that number. And we're going to use f of x equals 6x plus 7. Now, this right here that I'm about to highlight, f of x, can be replaced by this, okay? Because that's what they're saying. They're saying f of x equals that. So instead of f of x, I'm going to put 55, and then equals 6x plus 7. Then you want to jailbreak. So 55 minus 7 gives me 48 equals 6x, and then the opposite is to divide by 6. So x equals 8. Okay? Of course, if you have any further questions about today's lesson, please do not hesitate to ask me in class.